Okay then, so today we're going to talk about pie charts. And I'll just give you a minute to have a look at this model. The charts below show the proportion of water utilized for various purposes in 6 regions of the world. And again, it says proportion of water utilized for various purposes in 6 regions of the world. Got North America, Europe, Central Asia, South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. So pie charts focus on parts of a total 100%. So every one of these pies adds up to 100%. That's always how pie charts work. Very often these are related to budgets or how much of a total amount is allocated to different things. So in this case, how much of the total available water is allocated to 3 different purposes: industrial use, domestic use, and agricultural use. Okay. So just from looking at this very briefly, without even caring too much about the numbers, what's the big obvious difference that stands out?
Industrial use and agriculture use.
Yeah, those are the big differences. So do you see a way of, like, an easy way to group this into maybe 2 groups?
Yes, North America and Europe and others.
That's right. So with this one, we can thank our lucky stars. It's a very straightforward way to divide this into 2 groups. North America, Europe use a lot of water for industrial purposes, and it's a very clear contrast with the other 4 regions where the vast majority of the water is used for agricultural purposes. So we've got our checklist here. It's a little bit different from the checklist for bar graphs, but we talked about the most salient features of the graph. So salient features are the most obvious, noticeable ones. And the way that Natalia grouped these is the way that we're going to stick to. So body paragraph 1 is going to be about North America and Europe. Body paragraph 2 is going to be about the 4 other regions. Now, what about verb tense? If you look at this graph, are there any dates on it? No. So if there's no dates, what's the most appropriate verb tense for us to use?
Present indefinite.
We call it present simple.
Simple.
Right? The sun rises in the east, the sun sets in the west. We use present simple for facts where time doesn't matter at all. Okay. Unlike bar graphs, we don't have overall trends and patterns other than the ones that we've talked about. We don't have any time comparison, so it's a little bit different here. So the overall pattern for each item, what would it be for North America and Europe? So, I mean, it's logical to start off with the item that's larger. So talking about Europe's industrial use of water, followed by North America's industrial use of water. And also, what do you notice about Europe's and North America's domestic and agricultural use of water? Check that out.
In 2 times, North America use more water for domestic use than Europe. And opposite, the agriculture use twice less.
Yeah, that's a very interesting pattern, that these ratios are basically reversed. That's definitely worth mentioning. Okay, we've also got some additional pattern contrasts. If you look at the 4 other regions, Central Asia, South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, do you see any other possible subgrouping according to their industrial and domestic use of water? Let me give you a clue. What's similar about Africa and South America?
The domestic use is higher than the industrial use.
That's right. And what about the other two regions? Central Asia and Southeast Asia.
Agriculture use is, yes, industrial use is higher.
That's it.
Yeah.
So in these two, it goes agriculture, domestic, industrial. And in Southeast Asia and Central Asia, it's agriculture, industrial, domestic. So that's a subgrouping that you can do within that second body paragraph. There are no other patterns to speak of, really. This one is significantly easier in terms of what you're looking for. Let's talk about the structure. Our first body paragraph always has two parts and two parts only. It's the context and the overview. So to write the context, and that's the most general description of this kind of graph, you just need to paraphrase the prompt that they give you. So this business here that IELTS provides. I would always try to paraphrase it chunk by chunk because this does work surprisingly often. So let's just parse this sentence. We've got a subject, verb, object, preposition, phrase structure, and we see this a lot. So the chart below is our subject, and forget about below. You're not going to use that. The charts below show the proportion of water utilized for various purposes in 6 regions of the world. So one more time, subject, the charts below, verb, show, object, the proportion of water utilized for various purposes, and then we've got a preposition phrase in 6 regions of the world. So I'd like to give you about 2-3 minutes to paraphrase this, which means put it in your own words. Try and use the same structure. So let's compare these things, because there's like band 7 level writing means you got to cover the main points. If you want to get above band 7, you have to increase the level of detail. Now, what makes this difficult is if you had unlimited time, it's very easy to do this. But in 20 minutes, it's hard for most people to add those details in that short time period. So this is like the simplest one here. The graphs illustrate the percentage of water consumed for different usages in 6 regions worldwide. Right? When you start adding detail by saying, for example, domestic, agricultural, and industrial uses, right? That's an additional important detail. If you list the regions, that's an additional detail that you can add, right? We don't have a source for this one. That's kind of the difference between lower levels of development and higher levels of development. It's the details that you can put in that short amount of time. Okay, next step is the overview. We don't want it to be too general and we don't want it to be too specific. There has to be a fine line. There's no data if at all possible. Okay, and start your overview by saying, generally speaking, it can be clearly seen that. So this signals to the examiner that this is your overview, and it also shows a correct usage of passive voice. Okay, so this improves the grammatical range score. Okay, so your overview is going to consist of basically 2 parts, the 2 parts we talked about earlier, regions where the main use of water is for industrial purposes, main use of water is for agricultural purposes. Okay, give you a couple minutes to write a 1-sentence general overview, and please just pop it into the chat.
What's the best from among ours?
This one's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
This one's great too. They're all great. Okay, for paragraphs, my advice is that topic sentences should be general. Sometimes you can avoid mentioning data, which helps both with cohesion and word count. It helps with cohesion because if you put a lot of details into either a general overview or your body paragraph topic sentences, it's too much for the reader right away. It's like you're hitting them over the head with details and data. Don't do it. If you can, start the body paragraphs with general statements. So you can say, in 2 regions of the world, the main use of water is for industrial purposes. And notice how this matches the general overview. Okay. Then for the second body paragraph, you can start it by saying a different pattern is seen in these other regions where water is primarily used for this other purpose. It's a nice general topic sentence. There's no data in it. The reader understands exactly what's coming next, and then you provide the supporting data afterwards. So for the first body paragraph, we've got in 2 regions of the world, the main use of water is for industrial purposes. And you've got the percentages for Europe and North America. And then we also note that usage patterns were reversed for domestic and agricultural use, right? In terms of the 1637 versus 3414. So that's what you should talk about as well. And for the second body paragraph, the outline's going to look something like this. A different pattern is seen in those 4 other regions where water is primarily used for agriculture. So I would talk about these percentages, the main ones, and then I would break it down into Africa and South America and talk about where domestic use is the second largest use, and then industrial purposes. Then you can make some comparisons too. For example, you can note that Africa uses 6% of its water for industry versus 9% for household use, so that's 1/3 less. And then South America uses half as much water for industrial purposes compared to household use. And then Central Asia and Southeast Asia talk about industrial usage being the second highest use, and domestic purposes, you can note that 8% is 1/3 less than industrial use. Okay, any questions about this outline? All right, take a look at it. I'm going to pop this into the chat. And I'm not going to share this document with you right now because there's a model response at the bottom. I don't necessarily want you to look at this at the model response before you start writing, okay? So you can check it out later, but for now, I'd like you to write just on your own in the forum.
Then I was thinking, even if I have to write in my own native language, to score 7 out of 9 would not be an easy task.
Well, the thing, task 1 academic is much harder than task 1 general. So on the average worldwide scores for the academic exam are lower than they are for the general exam. Nobody's brought up knowing how to write about this stuff. This is a genuinely hard task. It's got its own vocabulary. You have to be really familiar with these to just be able to look at it and know what to talk about. This comes easily to me because I've been doing this for years and I've been helping people for years. But when you first sit down to look at this kind of stuff, it's like a foreign language talking about statistics. It's its own language. So you need a lot of practice. And you have to look at a lot of these. There's a lot of models in the course that you should be reading.